Had fractions for a number of years, and we're going to have them again this year. I don't know if you realize this, but the actual word fraction comes from the Latin word frangere, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, which means to break or to be broken, or part of a whole. And I think of the first word I think of that we've heard before is fracture. When you break a bone, fracture a bone, that word comes from our word fraction. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I thought you might like that. So let's go over some other vocabulary, English words though. And you all know these, hopefully, but I just want to review and make sure you understand. The numerator is, of course, the number on top. The denominator is the number on the bottom. You have like denominators, which means the denominator on the bottom is like every other denominator on the bottom, and they're called like denominators, like 1/8, 3/8, 7/8. Unlike denominators would have numbers that are not the same. 5/8, 1/2, 2/3. Okay, and then we have proper fractions, which are really fractions that are less than a whole, less than 1. You'd have 3 out of 4, 3/4, 1/2, 2/3. All these are less than 1. Then you have improper fractions. Now, improper fractions can be greater than 1, or they can actually equal 1. They still call the ones that equal 1 are still improper. So you have 5/5, 6/5, 8/3, and all these in here, and then many more. And then you have a mixed number, which is a whole number with a proper fraction. You usually don't see a whole number with an improper fraction. So we call the mixed numbers in general the whole number with the proper fraction. 1/2, 6 1/100ths, all these would be examples of proper fractions, of mixed numbers, with proper fractions. Okay, so our next slide is, you don't have to write this down, I just want to talk about this, make sure you understand this, is that you must learn to estimate fractions. And that's probably something you've not done a lot of. And that's what we're going to really focus on. Because now we're not just going to have 3 1/4, we're going to have negative 3 1/4. So we have to think differently a little bit about how to work with these numbers. You're going to need to really think, like I said, as you figure out the solutions. Always estimate. You always want to estimate about what will my answer be. Is it reasonable? Is my answer reasonable for what's being asked? Okay, we'll practice that a lot and really get your brain working. All right, which is always a good thing. All right, so first thing we're going to do is just describe fractions that are close to 0, close to 1/2, and close to 1. And I've listed several examples. Let's go through these carefully. You have ones that are close to 0. These are all ones that are close to 0. And as you look at them, what would be a way you would summarize all them? Well, you could say there's always a really dinky number, a really small number on top. And the small number on top, of course, has to be compared with the bottom number. Like you could have, the number has to be very small on top compared to the bottom. Okay? The difference between the top and the bottom number is usually pretty big. Pretty great difference between the bottom and the top number. They're not close together. If that happens, it's probably going to be a number close to 0. Okay? Which means, and we'll talk about this later, but if you have a number, say, 5 1/10, since that 1/10 is almost like nothing, this number really is close to 5. Okay, that's how we're going to use it, because we're going to have mixed numbers in our problems most of the time. Okay, numbers that are close to 1/2 these are some examples here. And as you look at those, think about how you would summarize them. And I think it'd be pretty fair to say that the numerator is about half the denominator. Not exactly, if it is exactly half, then it is equal to half. But those that are near 1/2 could be either less than 1/2, like 4/10 would be less than 1/2, but 6/10 would be more than 1/2, but they're still close to 1/2. Do you see the difference? They could be, a little bit on either side. Okay, then lastly, we have numbers that are close to 1. And these are all some fractions that are close to 1. Now notice some of them are improper. We have 15/12, that's an improper fraction, but it's still close to 1. Okay, so how would we summarize all these? Well, the numerator and the denominator are close together. That'd be a pretty good summary. The numerator doesn't have to be less than the denominator, but they're pretty close. Like 15 and 12 are pretty close together. 6/7 is close together. 5/6 is close. You could have 7/6. I guess I didn't put that one up. If you had 7/6, that's close together, but it's still improper, but it's still close to 1. It's a little bit more than 1. Okay, so get to kind of think about fractions a little differently now, perhaps. Okay, so now we're going to try some on our own. Okay, we want to sort all these fractions. I just listed a whole bunch of fractions, and we're going to see which ones are close to 0, 1/2, and 1. So we're going to do it together. You can kind of do it on your own. Maybe you want to pause the video and see if you can do it all first and see if the answers are the same. Let's go ahead and go with each one. 3/5. Now there, 3 and 5. 3 is about half of 5. 3 is half of 6. So I'm going to call that close to 1/2. Okay. 3/4. Now 3/4 is interesting because, well, they're close together, so you pretty much say 1. It's close to 1, but it's also close to a half. So sometimes some of these could be in both, okay? And sometimes you'll say, oh, that's close to half, and sometimes you'll use it being a problem and say, well, it's better to think of it as close to 1. As long as you're remembering what you're doing, that'll be very helpful. So I'm going to put this actually in both places. Okay, 1/4 is definitely going to be close to 1, okay? 3/7 is, well, 3 is about half of 6, and that's pretty much close to a half, I'd have to say. All right, 3/7. 4/7 is also close to a half. 1/7, close to 0. 1/3, close to 0. Remember, they're pretty far apart. Although 1/3 doesn't seem like it. 1/3 is another one you could put over here because 1 is half of 2, which is close to 3, so it could say it's kind of close to a half as well. 8/9 would definitely be over here next to 1, near 1. 5/9, you'd have to say it's about a half, because 5, again, is half of 10, which is 9 is close to 10. 4/9 is the same thing. You put it next to a half, near a half. 1/6, of course, over here. 9/8 would be over here. Even though it's improper, it's still close to 1. 5/12, you'd have to say that'd be about a half. 2/12, all right, that'd be pretty much close to 1 because they're pretty far apart. 2/5 is another one. You could put it here, you could put it here. I'm going to put it here because 2, I'd like to think of that as pretty close to a half. Probably it's closer, there's like 1/5 you put close to 0 there, so this would probably opt out to be a half. 9/11, 9/11, that's a little bit maybe a tricky one for you. Well, 9 is not, half of 9 is 18, that's pretty far from 11, so I'm going to have to say that's close to 1. 9/11, not really close to half. 6/11, that's more like close to a half, because 6 is half of 12 and 11 is close to 12. 4/5 would have to be here because they're right close together, and 2/3 I'd have to put here, although 2/3 again is one you could put here too as well. All right, hope that helps. We could do a lot more, but that I think will give you a good idea of how to think about the fractions. All right, so now we're going to be adding them. But first I want you to always estimate. So we're going to practice estimating and just then kind of see what it looks like on the number line. All right, so the first one is 2/5 plus 7/8. So 2/5 is, again, that's about a half, and 7/8 is about 1. That symbol there I use for about, or yeah, that's about. Sometimes they have two of those to mean about or approximately or whatever. Sometimes you'll see that. Okay, so you have 1/2 plus 1 is about 1 1/2. So if you think of it on the number line, 2/5, I'm just saying if it's about a half, it's about right here. 2/5 would probably really be more like right there. Plus 7/8, so plus about 1. So you have to go up like a hole, so you land about right here for the actual answer, which is close to 1 1/2. All right, the next one, 1 5/9. Now 1 5/9 is about 1 5/9 is about a half, because 5 is half of 10 and 9 is close to 10. That's 1 1/2 plus 2/3 is close to 1. So 1 1/2 plus 1 is about 2 1/2. So again, on the number line, we have 1 5/9 would probably be really about right here. It's a little bit more than a half. And then you would add about a half, a little less than a half. So you'd land probably about right there on the number line if you were to add it, but that's pretty close to 2 1/2. We're just estimating here, not getting an idea of about what it would be. Okay, now we're going to subtract. So we have 2 3/5. Well, 2 3/5 is close to 2 1/2. Minus 1 1/10. Well, 1 1/10 is really like 1. So 2 1/2 minus 1 is about 1 1/2. So you start with 2 1/2, which is right here. Start here, 2 1/2. And then you go down about 1, and actually we go down a little bit more, and we'll be up a little bit more, so you probably land about at 1 1/2. Okay? I think our last slide here is going to be actually doing some problems. And this time you'll notice some negative signs, minus signs that you haven't seen in doing fractions yet. Let's start off easy first, okay? Let's estimate first. We have 4 3/5 and plus 2 1/2. So 4 3/5 is close to 4 1/2 plus 2 1/2. Okay, so 4 1/2 plus 2 1/2 is about 4 plus 2 is 6. A half plus a half is 7. All right, is 1, which would be 7. That's our estimate. Let's see if it really works out. You have 4 3/5. What I like to do is always put them in a column. Then you find your common denominator, which here would be 10. And here we'd multiply this by 2 and that by 5. I'm not going to go through all this. I hope you know how to do all that. But you'll see that it'd be 6 and 5 would be, and then you add them together, it's 11/10. Well, that's an improper fraction. 4 plus 2 is your 6. So you have to change this to be a 1 1/10, and then add that to 6, so you get 7 1/10. But now the thing that's different, that I really, really want you to really practice doing is, okay, is that close? Is that what I estimated? Is 7 1/10 what I thought it would be when I estimated? And yes, it is. 7 1/10 is really close to our estimate of 7. So we probably got, more than likely, you did it all right. I think about how there's so many ways that you can miss a step or multiply wrong or whatever, that you can get the answer wrong pretty easily. So this check of estimating before you even start is a really good idea of how to get it right. Plus, when you take tests where it's all multiple choice, you can already knock out some of the answers because you know it can't be, like I knew it couldn't be 1 or 5 or negative 10, okay? So you can automatically get rid of some of the answers that you know it wouldn't be. Okay, so the next one is 3 1/8 plus a negative 5 2/5. So let's just estimate first. 3 1/8 is close to 3, plus a negative 5, that's about 5 1/2. So now I think, oh, now here's where you really got to remember all your integer rules, okay? So it's unlike signs, so we're really subtracting. So if you need to just go, okay, wow, 5 1/2 minus 3. If you need to line up like that, that is A-okay. So 1/2 minus nothing is 1/2, and then 5 minus 2 is 2. But my higher number was negative, so the answer is negative. The estimate, not even the answer yet, okay, is negative 2 1/2. All right, so let's see how we can do with the real answer, see if we get close to negative 2 1/2 in our answer. Line them up. Now I know I need to subtract. So I know I need to subtract. I've got to have my higher number on the top and my other one on the bottom. And that's a difference in what you've been doing before. Before it was always the first number on top, second number. Now it's different because you've got the integer, the rational fractions. Okay? So here we have, now subtract. A common denominator is 40. Got the 16 and the 5. Hopefully you remember how to do all that. And so 16 minus 5 is 11, and then the 5 minus 3 is 2. So I got negative 2 and 11/40. So that's pretty close, you got to say, to negative 2 1/2, because 11/40, that's more like about a fourth, I understand, but with all that we have going on and how we estimate it, that's pretty close. We call that pretty close. And I just brought this here to remember that we subtract, so you put the larger number on top. Remember, the answer is negative. That's another thing that you haven't had before. You just put the answer down and not even think about it. Now you got to think, oh, higher number was negative. Okay, my answer is negative. Okay? All right, so the last one for this series is negative 4/5 minus a negative 2 1/3. A lot of negatives. So again, let's estimate first. We have negative 1 minus negative 2 1/2, right? That's about 1, and that's about 1/2. Or you could have said just negative 2. I thought I'd go make it a little bit harder on the video just so you can kind of see how to work with that. Well, I have two negatives, so I have a minus sign, so you know minus means to add the opposite. So I did it here, but let me just make sure you really understand. I added the opposite, okay? And I got negative 1 plus a positive 2 1/2. So my signs are different, so I really have to subtract. Again, if it helps you to go ahead and write, okay, 2 1/2 minus 1. Oh, yeah, that's 1 1/2. Now, is it negative or positive 1 1/2? Well, if you look at when you had the plus sign, the higher one was positive. So it's going to be a positive 1 1/2. So when you go ahead and do the actual number, actual problem, yeah, I've had to cross out a lot here, but you can see 2 1/3 had to go on top because I had to subtract. I really had to subtract because the numbers were the signs were different. So again, the higher one went on top. I'm subtracting the 4/5. I'm going to remember my answer is positive. So I get my common denominators, and here in this situation, you've had this before, but here my 5, the number on top, was too small. So remember, when you borrow 1 from here, you don't just put a 1 and make that 15, because the one you borrowed is really a whole 15 over 15. That's the one you borrowed, because now you have 15 as a common denominator. So, but I already had 5 of them. So now I have to add 5 plus 15, and I get this number 20. So 20 is a number I can subtract the 12 from to get my 8/15. And then I have this 1 minus 0 is just 1. And remember, my number is positive. Let me check and see if it was close. Oh, 8/15 is kind of close to 1/2. So yeah, 1 1/2, that checks. Okay, we're going to be doing more of these